Hi, AP Psych. Sorry about that. We're going to start Unit 6 today, Developmental Psychology. And I apologize in advance if you hear Sesame Street and Jack. All right, so Developmental Psychology from the cradle to the grave, right? That's the phrase we use. That's what we're going to go through today. So, gestation. Noting the physical developments of the body. Developmental psychology focuses on development of the brain, behavior, and internal processes from cradle to grave. So development begins with conception. That's how we create a human being, right? So the merger of DNA from a single male sperm and a female egg in the ovary, they merge. The sperm releases enzymes, penetrate, and merge with the egg, initiating the genetic merger of father and mother's DNA. After the merger, the egg is shut out of the rest of the sperm, and the nuclei combine with unique DNA sequence, and the zygote forms. After 10 days, the zygote attaches itself to the uterine wall, with the inner cells becoming the embryo and outer cells becoming the placenta. Fewer than half of the fertilized eggs survive past the 2-week mark. I do not think you will need to know this for the exam. I do not think they will ask you this question. But again, it's just to give you a sense of how it all begins, right? So after conception, a new cell develops into a fetus during the gestation period. This is the period of development and growth. I have an issue with this sentence, but after 9 weeks, the fetus is unmistakably human. We're not going to get too into that. We talked about that in class when we went through this. The purpose of the first slide here is just to note that when we talk about human development and psychology, the next slide is what may come up in a question. It's that any issues that may arise during this period, during the development of the fetus. So some complications. There are several factors that can disrupt or harm the fetus during the gestation. It can cause a miscarriage, genetic mutation, physical cognitive abnormalities, and other harmful developments. So when we're talking about factors that will impact a fetus negatively, we're talking about teratogens. So the picture is supposed to be humorous. A teratogen is an agent such as chemical or a virus that can harm the embryo during embryonic development. This can include drugs, alcohol, sicknesses, arsenics, toxics, and this all can result in things like physical handicaps, deformities, behavioral issues, diminished cognitive abilities. So to remember how to pronounce this word, you could think of a T-Rex because the idea is that it's a teratogen. So one of my biggest fears when I was pregnant is all these different things that could go wrong. If you look at a list of what pregnant ladies can't do, it's quite it's quite lengthy. Can't eat. I see mercury right there, so you can't have sushi. Can't have cold cuts because it has oh dang, I forgot the phrase. Because you can have them heated up but not cold. I don't know. Couldn't have caffeine. Oof, that was the worst. Couldn't have any caffeine. I was so sick for about a week with caffeine withdrawals. Can't take medications, right? So even if you do get sick, you're allowed like Tylenol. But again, this is all because we have learned that intaking these different toxins, these drugs, drinking obviously you can't do, could really cause some complications. And it was my understanding, like, the worst things you could do pregnant was drinking, doing drugs, and smoking. Those were like the top 3. And then I would say next is caffeine. A teratogen is a prolonged exposure. One example is the fetal alcohol syndrome if a woman is drinking during her pregnancy, and this can cause like a slew of issues that are both physical and cognitive. I had a student that suffered from this, and one of the issues he had was sight. He had really thick glasses. He had a hard time with his sight, and we believe. Remember, it's a lot of this is like we don't know anything, right? But part of that was how his mother took care of herself. during her pregnancy. So these are types of complications. So the things that you should really take away here is if a teratogen is mentioned, that's something that is impacting the fetus in a negative way, usually something the mother is doing. And fetal alcohol syndrome, I think if you see that phrase, you can make that connection that the person has drank during their pregnancy and has caused physical and cognitive complications. So you make it through that 9 months of hell. Just kidding, not really. And then we move on to the early skills. I don't know if you heard Jack seasonal. Okay. As we grow, our body and brain, they continue to develop. There are biological changes to our body and our brain that cause thoughts and behavior. This is maturation. Think of maturing, right? So the biological process that enables orderly change in behavior. So toddlers have very little impulse control. They scream, they cry, they run. And then as they get older, those things should develop. And the reason why they're developing is because your frontal lobe, which is the part of your brain that's really trying to manage impulse. I believe this is discussed in a previous unit. So in about your 20s, your prefrontal cortex, your frontal lobe, is becoming more and more developed, and you are improving in your control and impulses. Maturation is relatively uninfluenced by an experience, as nature sets the basic course of cognitive development and behavior, while nurture provides minor adjustments to it. So basically what that means is your ability to mature and to have control over your impulses is really genetic. Part of it is from your upbringing. So just a little fun example of toddlers having no impulse control. When my son is done with his food or doesn't like it, he takes it and proceeds to heave it onto the floor, and it's fun. And then I have to go and pick it up. And he's not cognitively ready to understand why that's not a good move. It's frustrating. There's not much you can do. You just say no, and he laughs. But anyways, so humans have, roughly speaking, a universal motor development progression and timeline. So the idea is after birth, neural networks eventually are able to walk, talk, remember, and then there are other motor and cognitive faculty spurts. So infants will roll over and then sit and then crawl and then walk. So when you think of universal motor development, it's that series of different things, right? One has to happen before the next one. If you are watching the documentary Babies, which I have to upload, I think it's available on YouTube now in addition to Netflix. What's fascinating is they did some research that toddlers, babies, whatever you want to call them at that age, if they were walking, they produced more words. But the children that were not walking yet were still making sounds and not words. So the walking babies and the crawling babies of the same age were making the same amounts of like verbal communication, but the walking babies had more words than the crawling ones. So my son does not walk yet, but he babbles, not many words. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if the words come with the walking, which I would argue is part of that universal motor development. That if that makes any sense to you, I hope I didn't just make that all more confused. Okay, early development. So I was just talking to my mom about this actually. There are several developmental stages regarding relationships as babies begin to form schemas. We actually watched a video about this, if you remember. Think of schemas as like little clusters of information. So the video we watched, I think there will be a slide on this later, about a child seeing a cat and learning, or a dog and learning to say dog, dog, and then they see a cat and they call it dog because for them their grouping is every furry four-legged animal is dog, right? So these are like form schemas. They're little groups of how we organize new information. So around 8 months, the schema from mom and dad has formed, and infants have sometimes stranger anxiety. So meaning their little heads have managed to wrap their brain around, all right, these folks feed me, take care of me, and they even look at you and say mama, dada, right? Now, if I see someone else, well, I don't have a piece of my brain that understands aunt, uncle, friend, neighbor, postman, restaurant delivery guy. So I'm scared of all of that because I don't get it yet, right? Their brains haven't created a little category for other people other than mom and dad. Ainsworth additionally discovered an attachment process that developed in children, mostly to mothers in their first year, and this is the attachment bond. So, this is dependent emotional connection to a parent, and you can see that in a child's behavior round one. If the child is scared or crying, they seek their attachment bond. And sometimes they even cry when they're separated from that parent. So when Jack wants to party, he says, "Dada, dada." He's so excited. He wants to party. When he is scared, he brings out the mama, mama, mama. And also to bring up, I'm pushing that babies video. There's a scene in it where they show a part of your brain after birth in a woman that actually grows. And that's why they wake up so quickly in the middle of the night with their child. And the husband's brain, that portion didn't grow as much. However, there's a gay couple in the documentary that adopts a child, and the spouse that wakes up the most often with the child, his part of his brain grew as much as the mother's, which I found fascinating. So just throwing that out there, that attachment bond is where that little person that lives with you now attaches to you. And I would argue that parents have an attachment bond too that can be seen in their brain. All right. It's the utmost importance that a healthy relationship between the child and a parent ensures a sense of basic trust, right? That's sensitive, loving, caring attitude of trust rather than fear. Um, Basic trust was researched and published by our buddy Erik Erikson, studying the impact of parents and establishing trust between them and their children. He also studies the continued development of children, noting that by age 12, most children have an established sense of self-concept where they are really developing who they are, how they feel about things. And then from 12 to 18, they develop that identity and then assimilate that into society. So at the age of 12, that's where you kind of, what's the word I want to use? Rebel against your family and your parents and what they think from what you think. That's your self-concept. And then as you move through your high school years, you kind of see how does your sense of self fit into society. Okay? And then we have our critical periods. So this goes directly along with the previous slide here with that connection. So healthy development is exposure to information and stimulus during a critical period. This is the optimal period early in life of an organism when exposure to certain stimuli or experiences produces normal development. So there are certain things that should happen by certain ages. There's actually a list when you go to the doctor. So this is talking about if, let's say, sorry, switching gears a little bit. Did not, if you were not exposed to language in the first 7 years of your life, it will be extremely difficult to develop language later because the Broca area and the Wernicke area of your brain didn't develop. When you go to the doctor when they're little, they have a little checklist of all the things does your child do. Does your child react to your voice? Does your child sit up on their own? Does your child go to a toy box and pick out something they want? So they're asking all these different cognitive and physical questions to see if they are developing properly because these are critical periods. And then in animals, I won't spend too much time on this, we have what's called imprinting. So they are born, and then imprinting is often developed at a very young age. Lorenz did show that imprinting was a critical period. So what the animal will do is they are born, and then whatever is there, they imprint on. So hopefully it's mom. It's a parent, so they're with that animal and they have a close bond. However, if let's say they were born and abandoned or something happened and there was a ball with them, they would imprint on the wall. Okay? So I'm going to stop there because I want to keep this under 15 minutes. I hope that was helpful. We're going to next do personality, and then cognitive development.